Good evening, everyone. Dr. Jeff here with Timothy and Jim.
Howdy.
Having fun again tonight.
Good evening.
On our Wednesday night. This is number 8 for us. 8 times of getting together and having some fun. Kicking around this idea of where did we come from, why are we here, and where are we going. Once again, we're not stating that we know this. We're just playing with it, kicking it around, having fun with it, brainstorming, extrapolating, all those good fun things to do. Some of the things that we've walked our way up to this point. This notion is, there's a reason for all of this. Again, can't prove it, but you also can't disprove it. This idea that there's some methodology, process, intelligent design. It's too intricate for there not to be. And for there to simply be a one and done would almost, it just seems so disingenuous of why all this significant intricacies if there's just this one experience here and then nothing and the great void. So if that's where you are as a listener, if that mindset appeals to you, I don't know what to say. I personally don't have any input to that conversation. It would be an interesting one to have, and I've had it many times with folks that come into the office and claim to be an atheist or agnostic, and we don't have battle. I just find it interesting that people still claim to love and they claim to follow rules and they seem to have some meaning in their life. So I find it very interesting that could exist without there being some reason for going through all of this. And it's hard. I mean, if you're not having a hard life, there are some that would say you're here on vacation. And there is a certain percentage, according to some, who have been here and got their butts kicked and then signed up for the Carnival cruise here on the planet this time around. And they get to laugh and splash and play, and it's fairly simple for them, and they're really not here in this lifetime to learn. And I'm totally cool with that. That makes a lot of sense for me. And then there are people here that are really, they're the prodigies that at age 18 they've already completed 2 college degrees and they've started a business. They're really about learning as much and getting as much out of this trip as they can. And then of course there'd be everything in between. Some of the tweeners might look more like I've been here doing this time and time again, and the Groundhog Day, we might call it, the do-over. And it's fascinating to consider the role of suicide in that particular model, if you will. That culturally, with the exception of the Gauls existed sometime Egypt time frame, between Egypt and Roman time frame, there were a group of people called the Gauls, and that's where we get the term the Gaul of that person, is that if they didn't like the way things were going, they jumped off a cliff, and they believed they had an instant do-over. And my guide in Peru talked about the sacrifices that people made at Machu Picchu were really not that significant to them, because they really believed they'd be right back again, almost right where they left off, if you will.
And they were born to it.
Yeah, and that was how they were raised and what they believed, so it really wasn't that much of an atrocity or a big deal to them. And again, the point of our discussion here tonight isn't to prove or disprove or agree or disagree with any of that. It's just interesting conversation. So this notion of where are we going? The model that works best for me is with some sort of structure that would involve a progression, and not due to merit or skill or achievement, but simply the willingness to show up here and go through it. And the it would be life, the struggle of birth, if you think about that. We've all heard if you help a baby chick out of its egg, it doesn't eat the inside of the lining of the egg, and it gets the nutrition and stuff that it needs to fight immunities, and it dies shortly thereafter. Same thing with the butterfly. If you help a butterfly out of its chrysalis, it doesn't pump blood into its wings, and it will never fly. So there inherently needs to be some form of struggle going through this process in order to get the strength and get the confidence and the ability, and nature does some of it, and maybe nurture does some of it too. Those are just very interesting things to look at.
Interesting to me that you choose to call it struggle.
Yeah, that's just a word I chose. There's probably many others. What do you like?
No, it's just an interesting choice of word, because to me the struggle implies hardship. And while in many cases the perception from the outside looking in may be one of hardship, the one that's being in the experience does not necessarily have that experience.
Yeah.
And so to assign it, to me, a kind of negative connotation doesn't seem a good balance in that it's... I like a lot how they talk about in Law of Attraction as contrast.
Right.
I like the idea of contrast because it doesn't assign positivity or negativity. It's just events. It's just stuff that takes place, and then how we respond to it, how we engage it, how we resist it, all of that comes from our engagement with that or non-engagement with that, which can be a struggle. if that's the propensity of the individual or their upbringing or their cultural history or whatever the case may be. But
Yeah.
didn't mean to derail you, just
Not derailed at all.
food for thought.
I've talked about challenge before, and you have some really easy days and some days that are a lot more difficult, and a different way of saying struggle or contrast. I do like the idea of conscious languaging, and you're giving me an opportunity to be more conscious about that word, and for a lot of people, struggle most likely does have more of a negative than positive connotation.
Merriam-Webster defines struggle as to make strenuous or violent efforts in the face of difficulties or opposition.
It's pretty
Cool.
intense.
Yeah.
Yes.
Pretty intense.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, I think that the choice of the word comes from something much bigger, in the sense that the religious paradigm is fraught with it.
Oh, yeah.
Big time.
I'm sure that's where it comes from.
It's the foundation of the human experience is struggle and suffering. So it's really easy to see those two concepts show up a lot in mass conscious discussion, because everybody's been there in some form or another. We've all gone through that training program. And
There might be a kinder, more inspired way to say something similar without it being that. My stepdad used to sign his letters, a fellow struggler. And it was kind of cool for a little while. And then when I started realizing that, okay, I can work my way through this plight of this chapter in my life, but then when I get to the other side, there's more freedom, there's lightness, there's wisdom, there's strength, and a fellow struggler just didn't sound very positive.
Right.
It sounded like a label, like a glass ceiling, that's the best we could know. And I think to say sometimes I feel like I struggle with things is very different than labeling ourselves as a struggler, because then there's power to that. There's tremendous power to that. So catch your drift. There's a few words.
Well, from my perspective, it's more to Jeff's point, which is for me personally, I'm very conscious of language, and I'm very conscious of how language gets used.
Yeah.
And when there are other parts of this that I want to address at some point, but I'm not sure where they fit in this. But because there's choices in language that sit funny for me, and I want to.
So what's a good word for what the butterfly is doing to that arduous?
It's transforming.
Sure, but the experience.
That's what he's doing. It's transforming. We're assuming from our perspective that what he's doing is suffering. We have no idea what that butterfly is going through internally. All we see is what we observe through our five senses, and we attribute a meaning to that, or we attribute a sensation that gives it meaning, that gives it purpose, that gives it significance, that makes it important. So we can look at it and say, "Here's a meme about a butterfly, and this is how we get to. This is how we change our lives through struggle," as opposed to, "This is how we change our lives by following the inner experience of who we are innately, and following that path so powerfully that we end up in a period of time where we know nothing except this thing, and then we have to figure out how to come out of that thing." And that transformation is not something that you can even be conscious of. No, not conscious of. Even we talked about it in another one about thresholds, going through doorways. You know, that you can't stand on one side of the doorway and know what's on the other side. You got to cross the threshold to be able to, with regard to consciousness and with regard to understanding paradox. And I said, I don't know that why would it be different in that circumstance, rather than it being an amazing display of microcosm, macrocosm. This is how transformation takes place. You come into this experience in one form, and you have the possibility and the potential, if you follow the innate experience of what you came on this planet to do, that you will go through a process that takes you into this state that allows you to transform completely from this one form of being into a completely other form of being. And it's very natural, and it's very organic, and it's exactly done the way it's supposed to be done, in the sense that it doesn't change. Like there may be just as many ways for a caterpillar to become a butterfly as there are human beings on the planet, but I don't know that we know that. What we know is they go through a process, but we have no idea what the depth of that process is all I'm saying.
That was a nice image for me, by the way, of the thinking about the when people, well-meaning individuals, show up and try to impart their wisdom or their understanding. Like, I want to help this thing, but they're actually, reminds me of when a lot of the GIs, American and Allied troops, came across some concentration camps, and they just gave all their rations, and the people ate them, and they couldn't handle it, and they perished from, so. Yeah, I catch your drift about the chrysalis, and that's cool to think about, because there are processes that are important to getting the journey and getting the full might of this journey.
Well, we camped out on this notion of struggle, so let's push a little further into it since we're here. And Jim provoked us into this idea of transformation. It might have come up in one of our previous podcasts that the best science can do to describe the transformational process of a caterpillar to a butterfly in the chrysalis state is that it liquefies, and they call it magic ooze. That the caterpillar literally turns into a liquid state, and it has molecular change so that it's structurally different as the liquid solidifies again, from that of a caterpillar to a freaking butterfly.
Get out of here, man.
It's liquid,
wow.
and they call it magic ooze. That's the best they can do.
That's good.
The interesting thing to me about that and this conversation is my limited knowledge of that would be a more effortless transformational process, as opposed to the struggle of pushing your way out of the chrysalis and getting the wings out and all that would require significant effort. So maybe some transformations are very simple and effortless, and some require tremendous time, training, preparation, and struggle. Maybe, I don't know. But that might be a way that we could look at it, and back to kind of contrast. Some easy, some hard. But one of the things that I have consciously done in my mind is I don't use the word suffering. I really just tried to switch that to struggle. And there are days where, doggone it, today was really tough. There were a lot of challenges that showed up in front of me. Yeah. Are we good with that? Any more conjecture? All right, well, let's transform this a little further. So, again, the model that works in this brain here for me is the idea that there's a progression of experiences built one upon another, and some can be borrowed, but most need to be experienced. And we've all heard that you kind of have to go through it yourself to understand it, and even though you can watch your friend do a mischievous deed and get in trouble and be punished for it, we oftentimes don't learn from other people's mistakes. We do seem to somehow need to make our own, and maybe make them several times to learn that the consequences are just not worth the joy or pleasure or whatever you get out of doing those sorts of things. So, that's what life is, the learning about relationships, learning about raising children, learning a skill, getting a job, keeping a job, changing occupations, aging parents, all of these kind of systematic things that we go through are challenges. They are part of the learning process. What is it like to encounter somebody with different color skin? Can you learn to love and appreciate them, from speaking a different language to having different sexual orientation or sexual preference? Can we work toward seeing ourselves as the one rather than the individual or the many or the separate? That's part of this journey as well. And it seems to take multiple lifetimes to have all of the various different experiences so that we could truly understand, if I was that person, I would do it differently, is what most people say. That always makes me laugh. Because truly, if you were that person, you would do exactly what they effing did. If you had their brain, their genetics, their experiences, dude, you would do exactly what they did, how they did it, when they did it, blah, 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 blah. So, put that in your pipe and smoke it. This idea that, why don't they just do this? That's what we then have to go maybe have that experience so we could understand why they wouldn't just do it this way or that way, or just stop doing it.
Well, they're not living your experience. They don't have your experience. They're generating their own.
Mm-hmm. And then we get into the whole judgment thing, and one of the items to push around a little bit is many lifetimes judging would lead you to a place where maybe one day you decided, I'm going to observe and try to give up this judging thing. And that's try to go through a day without judging something. Just try it. Just challenge yourself. I'm really going to just observe today. I'm not going to take a position on anything. That's a tough one.
It is a tough one.
Even laughing about something and making fun of it is a judgment. It may not be a harsh one, but it is. So where are we going? We're going to continue having these experiences, and we're going to continue to grow. And from some of the books and teachers and downloads I'm getting, those of us that are on the planet are really to be commended highly, because compared to other places that we could be, which is beyond the discussion or this particular topic for this discussion, this is a gnarly place. This is where, like I've talked about before, baby zebras get eaten halfway across the river by giant alligators and crocodiles. And this is a planet where betrayal occurs, and murder and war and all these other things from the wide variety of different consciousness, levels of consciousness that are here. So we are to be commended for coming here to choose this place to learn all of these lessons. It would be, in some cases, a battleground, if you will. And the idea of heaven on earth, that notion really doesn't apply here, because there can't be. And the more you try to do that, you'll wind up getting run right over by that train that you're standing in front of. That probably doesn't make sense to anybody but me at this point, but that's all right. There's nothing wrong with being a pacifist and choosing love over hate and choosing peace over war. And that's all part of our growth process too. But to think that war should not be on the planet is definitely arguing with reality. And it is here. It is part of our experience of knowing that there are people who are selfish and self-centered, and they don't have any problem taking something that doesn't belong to themselves, whether that's someone else's wife or their property or their house or their husband or their kid or whatever. And they're good with that. And it's our job to try not to judge that and pretend it isn't happening and tell ourselves that it shouldn't be happening, because, hey, guess what? It is. It's right there in front of us. So this is where we're going. We're going toward a place, a mindset, a consciousness where we can accept, appreciate, love, bond, grow, nurture. We're seeing it show up. If you just look around, if you have an open mind, that energy is manifesting more and more and more. And it's exciting to see. There's more of a global awareness of be kind to the planet. Don't buy as much crap. Don't throw as much crap away. Be more aware of what you're eating. That is taking place if you're open-minded and kind of looking around. And I venture to say anybody listening to this podcast would be of that mindset and that ilk to want to listen to what we're talking about. So be encouraged by that and give yourself credit for being brave enough to show up on this planet at this time in human history to go through and have all of these experiences. In Penny Pierce's book called Frequency, she describes 49 different octaves. I'm not a music major, but I understand if there's a term that goes behind a number, it must mean there's some level.
Penny Piercy?
Penny Pierce, in her book called Frequency. And these octaves are frequencies that we are operating in. And she talks about how level 1, like up to level 6, is like mineral and plant life, and then like you get the insects. And we talked a little bit about this in a past podcast. But you get up into the 18 to 21 range, and that's where human consciousness is. And you're like, oh my God, are you serious? That the highest human consciousness only goes to 21 and there's freaking 49 of these things? I mean, think about that for a minute. Think about that. It's like we're like at the top of the bottom third, or I didn't say that right, but it's like, man, that's not even halfway. No. Our very best is less than halfway. So if there's any truth to that, if that holds any credence, and oh, by the way, that book has been around over a decade, and it's done pretty well. She's done pretty well as well. She's gone on to write 3 or 4 other books. And it's just a model. I'm not trying to prove that it's right or true or anything. But just imagine if that has any credence or value at all, that there's a heck of a lot more ahead of us for us to grow toward, learn to do, evolve, advance, which is exciting to me. Because I would be so depressed and bummed if this was just a one and done experience. And somehow I showed up as a human this time around as opposed to a jackrabbit or a caterpillar or whatever else that could be.
So there's a lot of points that are being made and kind of brushed over. I just want you to know that if you want to have a conversation with someone who's an agnostic, you just look across the table. That's if you want to talk about morality and how science can really get into what makes us make moral decisions. It's based on survival, and we do better as a species if we're kind. And anyway, there's a lot of studies that show that before children can speak, that they have an inherent understanding of right and wrong. They'll watch a film, or they'll watch the other kids that are part of the study that have their dessert taken from them, or their toy taken from them, or something. When fairness isn't distributed, the kids' brains go nuts. And this is before they have conscious languaging of how this is supposed to go. So it's in our DNA to be good to one another. I'm not saying that's the only thing we know how to do, but I don't think that we need to believe in false claims and tall tales to think that we would be lost without someone else's idea of how this ought to go for us. I think we are much more intelligent, much more capable than we gave ourselves credit for over the years. But anyway, if you ever want to chat about any of that kind of stuff, I'm right here. But I think it'd be interesting to peek at some of that sometime.
Yeah, I'm sure we will.
Yeah. So the idea that it's difficult for you to think about this being a one and done, and you said you'd be really bummed out if that was as far as it got, and I'm just curious, why would that bum you out if this was the only thing that we have evidence for, is this one and done? Why is that? Why is that challenging?
Nothing would matter. It's like nothing matters.
Really?
That's where it would take me.
I see. So this moment and this camaraderie, this thing that we look forward to doing each week, wouldn't hold water if you didn't think that it was for some greater good about something that's outside of us?
Well, I think that, to me, takes us right back to there has to be more to this than just me. Right. And that I'm going to be here just one time. Because if I truly was just doing this for me and here one time, I wouldn't be here tonight.
Really?
I'd be doing some of that stuff I talked about earlier.
I don't know, man.
That's oddly hypocritical.
Yay!
Like, what the? What?
That's really interesting.
I can't even, like...
Well, let's get into the hypocrisy, because I'm sure if the three of us are having this conversation right now, there's other people out there that are thinking and jiving with you guys too, so let's go there.
Well, it's almost like there's like a mutual exclusive, like...
A schism. I love it.
Because you have nothing that shows you that there's more than one and done, and any evidence to the contrary simply states that there's a larger part of us that carries on, which is not the personality you're currently consumed by, which means that when this personality goes, you're done, for all intents and purposes.
Oh, that part I'm down with.
So, in that regard, there's still there's that aspect of it. So, to Timothy's point of something outside of yourself, if you're not, it comes back to the butterfly. It comes back to the caterpillar. What motivates that freaking caterpillar to climb that tree, to get to that branch, to hook itself up there, to turn to liquid, to become a butterfly?
DNA, right?
Maybe. You're saying it's DNA?
I think you said it was DNA last.
Well, I think it's in the DNA.
Right.
I think it's a part of the whole experience. But to me, what drives that is that compelling desire to transformation that it appears everybody seems to have at some level, in some form, in some capacity, the desire to become more, the desire to expand, the desire to... There's something innately within us that says that moves us forward. And I think that the hypocrisy of it is that it's almost like taking two different perspectives. You're taking the egoic perspective and trying to put it on a larger perspective by saying, well, if that was the case, then I'd let my ego run rampant. And my question is, then why don't you?
Because I have a soul spirit that, fortunately for me, overrides that.
What does that mean? Overrides it. So you have a spiritual imperative that creates restriction in your world that says that these things are better than these things?
Absolutely. As far as less consequence or more value. Absolutely.
So there's an assumption that if you decided for a year to wake up every day and smoke a big fat bowl, that would be a bad thing as opposed to getting up every day and running 5 miles.
It's going to have to be a little more complex than that.
Well, okay, so smoking a bowl or reading the Bible.
No, so
Or smoking a
I
bowl
can answer the
or-
question if it's if it's self-serving versus servant leadership, or other serving, or communal serving, or it's something greater than myself, then that leads me to want to do more of those sorts of things rather than just get all the booty for me.
So was there...
I don't understand that either, by the way.
Get all the booty for me? Really?
You're doing it anyway. Everything you do is for you. It satisfies something in you. Otherwise, you wouldn't do it. I don't care what it is. Whether you take a piss, whether you give somebody a massage, whether you have sex with that one, whether you coach this particular person in a particular way, whatever it is brings you the satisfaction, and that's what moves you forward. That's what expands your experience. That's what takes you, what compels you to become the butterfly. To me. And you can science it up all you want. There's lots of science that can be applied to different stages of that. But I still think it comes down to you didn't come here, you didn't come to this planet, you aren't born into that body because you're 7.5 billion other people. If you are not focused on what this being brought to the planet, then you are not serving.
Yeah, I agree.
And the only way you're going to know that is here. Now, it's going to come through the experiences you create in the world. It's going to come through the interactions. That's why you create them. You create the experiences to stimulate that part of you, to stimulate that understanding, to stimulate the desire to learn. It doesn't matter what they are, because my choices are going to be different than your choices, and that's the magnificence of this process. It's like I was saying before, we really have no idea if every single butterfly has a very unique process. We don't know. We assume that it's a similar process, but we don't know if this particular caterpillar and the one that's over here are having two profoundly different experiences of the same process. We don't know. We can assume one way or another. I would choose to assume that they do. Because no two caterpillars are alike. It doesn't matter.
It brings me great solace thinking about this being my only gig.
That's just because you're lazy.
Yeah, obviously. Obviously.
That was purely in jest. It was purely in jest.
Yeah, it was very gratifying in a way when I began looking at religion and what I was indoctrinated with, and peeling that back and having more of a critical view on it, because I studied it because I wanted to be a decent conversationalist around it. It just, I wanted to be able to defend what I could defend with as much fact as I could find. And there weren't a lot of facts I could find, unfortunately. Or fortunately, however you want to look at it. But I got to a place where when I started thinking about this idea that, well, if the Bible isn't true, and it's allegory, and there's some decent lessons in there, and there's some really shitty lessons in there. It's a really awful book. Mm-hmm. Really awful book. Goodness gracious. I mean, the reasons for killing and maiming and raping and pillaging and spoils of war and owning slaves and how to beat your slaves. And I mean, just stuff that's so easily overlooked. Mm-hmm. Most people don't know is in there, but that stuff's always fascinated me. Why is it in there? You know, how much of it used to be more along those lines, and you know, how much. But what ended up blowing my mind was this idea of, okay, this is the only event that we have significant evidence for, and so if this is the only ride, then it makes it all the more important for me to enjoy as much of it as I possibly can. Mm-hmm. I have found that many people who are looking for something that's going to happen elsewhere or outside of themselves oftentimes might be missing out on what they could be doing with this in the present moment. And back to your notion of the potential for having heaven on earth, I think it's possible. Mm-hmm. I find it all the time in the most simple ways, and just hanging out with a lizard that just stops and checks and just staring at my eyeballs for 20 minutes. I've got some time on my hands from time to time. Time that I can spend by the sea, holding a newborn baby in the family, you know, just like there's little moments where there's just pure, absolute bliss. And I think the only thing that pulls us away from that is this conversation that we were in about suffering. And, how do we begin positioning ourselves in ways to where we can recognize that that's a channel that a lot of people, maybe mass consciousness, is tuning into. How have we learned to arrest that, pump the brakes on that, and be right here, right now, in this moment, and envelop what we can about how can we have some heaven on earth, and why can't we? So,
yeah, I'm with you there. I didn't want to interrupt his flow, but I also, that one red flagged me. Whoa, we gotta come back to that.
Undoubtedly, there are snippets and periods of it until that meteor smashes both you and the lizard.
Right.
And what would you call that? Is that still heaven?
Done?
Yeah. It like that doesn't...
Done?
Yeah, that doesn't... I think about, on a daily basis, I think about the relative absurdity that I get to be here at all. Mm-hmm. Like the chances that with famine and drought and lineage and just all these incredible things that went on, and I get to be here right now. If I think it was 100 years ago, I would be at 48 years old. I think that would have exceeded the life expectancy 100 years ago. It's right around there, something like that. So I often think that if I did happen to go, I just have crazy gratitude for this ride that I've got to have so far. And and if something happened and I didn't get to be here, I might have my whole holy shit moment of however I'm, getting taken out. But if I have a moment to myself, I'll be grateful that I got to do any of this. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's enough. I don't have something resting on something else going on somewhere. I don't. That doesn't make it more interesting to me. It's. I'm quite all right that I'm up leveling the planet with the consciousness that I have worked diligently toward, and if I can do some of that feels good. And the other incantations again are fascinating to consider, but it can end up seeming like a lot of mental masturbation to me personally, because there's just so much speculation. There's so many places that we can go with our ideas, and sometimes it's just nice for me to sink my feet in deep into the earth here And how can I make this day as beautiful and as sustaining and as applicable as possible?
Mm-hmm.
So do both of you ascribe to the idea of there being something after besides just this mystery of where that few grams of weight goes when our soul lifts
mm-hmm.
out of our bodies? And I'm just curious, do you guys have do you have something on a daily basis that you lean into that has to do with something happening after this life? Is that part of your how you filter this experience? Is the idea that this is prepping for another one?
Yeah.
Yeah?
For me, it works that way.
Okay. So if your life depended on it in this moment, Dr. Jeff, what would you say will happen to you when you are no longer in this body? What is the... Yeah.
Love the question. A couple of years ago, I actually witnessed this and thought I was having a hallucination. I was traveling northbound on the I-5 coming from Chula Vista back up to Oceanside, and I witnessed a car crash, and I saw something that was happening above the cars, and it looked to me like some ghosts or a hologram or some, I don't know, something that was taking place of a reunion. There were greeters and there were people surprised, and it was a fatal accident.
Greeters and the entities that you were witnessing? Or
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that, did my mind make it up? Probably. I don't know. But, it just kind of saw something that, from a lot of things that I've read, that unfold that way. So I would see that there's a transporting to a frequency that is different than this one, that there's some kind of a welcoming of pets and friends and what might have been enemies in this life or past lives that aren't any longer, that there's a reception that occurs, an opportunity to review your life of what you did with it, not a judgment by any means, an opportunity to meet with your spirit guides, to see if in fact you did accomplish the lessons learned that you came here to do, and feeling good about the ones you did and not upset about the ones you didn't. It's just kind of like, okay, I got 3 out of 4. High fives all around. And whether or not number 4 that didn't get done is even important enough to have to still do it.
Sure.
That sort of thing that transpires.
Can I ask a question? And if it's offensive in advance, I apologize. How's that?
I don't think you ever have to ask permission to ask a question.
Well, because it's going to push into...
Let's go.
So
this is why we're doing this. It's perfect.
What I heard was spiritualized Christianity.
Without the judgment.
Yeah. What I heard was, I've gotten out of the church, but I haven't left the whole box yet.
Okay.
And
there's no hell. Does that help?
But there's no heaven on earth either. So you're stuck somewhere in the middle. So anyway, yeah. So that's as I'm listening, that's what I'm here. I'm seeing all the correlations to managing to make nice the religious constructs that don't serve, but it's still within the construct of the religious construct that doesn't serve.
How so?
Well, because it's the same box. It's just painted different colors. Instead of an angry God, there's the universe, and instead of or some of the things you were using as examples.
A review, life review.
Yeah, instead of judged, there's a life review. Instead of an angry God, there's something else instead of there was just a lot of parallels that just surprised me. So I was,
you're right.
That's
How would that be offensive?
no, because because the pushing into it is sort of pushing into it. And I think I thought initially because it was pushing into the religion piece.
Mm-hmm.
And that tends to be a hot spot for lots of people, regardless of how far away they think they've gotten from it. So that's why I prefaced it. So that's interesting to hear and interesting to listen to to Timothy's question. Originally, it wasn't until you asked the question that I went, I don't ever think about it.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah.
It's not a contemplative point. I think about how more I can show up here.
Mm-hmm.
I think about how do I bring all of that here? Can I bring all of that here? All of me, all of can I? That's my impetus.
Yeah.
But it has nothing to do with whether there's a money changer on the other side telling me I paid enough money. It's like, couldn't give a shit. I don't care. It doesn't, if I get a life review, yippee. I was actually oddly enough thinking about this because somehow it came together with the death of my friend last year, and feeling him so intently and knowing his presence is here, and then thinking to myself, oh, he knows all my secrets. And then I went, so?
Yeah.
and so, I kind of didn't have anywhere to go after that. Kind of went, oh.
And so on that notion, and so would every other entity that can tune into that frequency, and because they also had secrets that were very similar to yours, maybe just slight variation.
I don't know if
They're
you
all
call it
like
secrets, but
BFD, right?
Yeah, it's the human experience.
Did I just date myself by saying BFD?
Only to like the late 90s. It's not too.
Yeah.
Maybe the early aughts.
Yeah, it's I don't have time, and there's not occasions in my day where I'm just thinking like, wow, when I check in with my spirit guides after I'm gone, they will look favorably on today, kind of thing. I don't. I'm not saying that motivates you. I'm just doing a. If I were having that dream, that's how I might filter something, is thinking about, well, all right, this is all kind of working up for the big test, And you've said in the past that you really like regimented things. You like, you like to really see the cause and effect. You like to earn your stripes, and that's part of how you find joy. And please help me if I'm misspeaking about any of that. But you like protocol. You like things to be. I heard you say in previous podcasts that that's important to you. Like it's a way that you
Just makes sense.
Yeah.
Just the same way that elementary school, somehow we decided that rather than send everybody to the same school for all 12 years, that high schoolers and junior high schoolers might be enough different that you'd want to separate them.
Yeah.
Right? Well, that concept came from somewhere. And, so it's, what if our evolution and evolving and growing is somewhat similar? We have elementary school, and we have junior high school, and college, and it just seems to, for me, that model, we're not reinventing the wheel. We're just kind of doing the same thing.
There is this was coming up earlier too, but there is a thing, and personal experience and the evolution of my experience of the evolution of my own consciousness is that there is the world, which is kind of connected to mass consciousness. So it's all of the thoughts that keep being thought, all the belief systems, all the structures, all of the things that man has put into place in order to make this place make sense. Once you spin your energy up to the point that you're no longer immersed in that energy, the trick then is to learn how to stabilize in that state so that you can maintain a vibration that doesn't bring you back down into that space.
Mm-hmm.
In the interim, there is a tendency to try to bring some of this up and try to bring some of this down. But more often than not, we try to bring this up because it's what we know.
Sure.
And I posit, and my experience is that there is a point in the process of your expansion that you have to release that illusion.
Mm-hmm.
And that you can't have anything tied to... One of the things that is going on for me, I'm calling my midlife crisis, is the disillusionment that I'm experiencing because I'm seeing the underpinning of everything. And it's the strangest, bizarrest, most upsetting and uplifting thing I've ever experienced in my life. Because every single thing that we attribute meaning to on this plane is tied to something that men created, mostly. Talking about the Bible, talking about we were talking about that when you stepped out for a second. Was this book that was created that is this thing that is this? The Bible is all, and it's a bunch of stuff that was written by a bunch of guys that was used to control people.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it is. And there's some good stuff in there if you catch some of the good. What'd you call them? Fables, but not fables, but
parables.
whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever that word
Yeah.
was. That can be really valuable and really telling about. But there's so much of the rest of it you have to filter through. But I think it's very similar to what happens in the process of conscious evolution. Is that you begin to see how, like lately, it's been this whole thing of how. About money driving everything. That under everything is what is it? How does it make me money?
Yeah.
That's the question that is asked probably more than anything else on the planet. How does it make me money? Doesn't matter what it is. I could have the best product in the world, and it could save millions of people. But there's this dichotomy. How's it going to make me money? Because in this world, that's what drives what happens.
Right.
My point is that in listening to your talking through that, I was hearing and seeing, trying to marry the two, and that's where what I was calling hypocritical, because it's not hypocritical in the sense of I have to find a different word, because hypocritical implies that there's it implies that there's a lie in one or the other. And there is. So I guess hypocritical is an okay word. Because ultimately, and I don't even know where it goes. All I know is that it doesn't seem like you can have both. You can't fully immerse yourself here in that fashion and be conscious. And you can't fully immerse yourself here and pull this with you and still remain conscious. So it's kind of an interesting... You can enjoy all the parts and pieces, but again, it comes back to what we were talking about before, about what you're here for.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that there's a spiteful, jealous God that's checking in on you? No? Okay. You've gone. Okay, good. When you think about God, how does it differ now than when I first met you? We were kind of vibing different, however, what was that, 14 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
How has your concept of God changed? And then I think this ties in nicely with where are we going? 'Cause
Yeah. absolutely. Just so much bigger and less less involved. For me, the work that God would do is being done by spirit guides or by our higher self or other levels of consciousness long before God ever gets involved or gives a shit. And I don't even know if there's, I mean, I don't know, but I don't see some Papa Daddy sitting in a chair somewhere that we're going to go sit on his lap and throw crowns to, unless that's what you need to see in a lower level.
Throw crowns to? Is that what you said?
Yeah, casting crowns.
I like that. That's beautiful. Yeah.
That maybe a lower level of consciousness would have that experience at a lower state of heaven. Or, you know, there's some writings that talk about 7 levels of heaven. I mean, it's like, how the hell? You know, it's like, what the heck? Don't know any of this stuff. But I don't see that because the model that makes sense for me involves there has to be contrast. Someone needs to play the villain, and it's a divine role. And that person doesn't go to hell for playing the villain.
What's an example of the villain today?
A Saddam Hussein,
okay.
An Adolf Hitler, a Mussolini,
Sure. Okay.
Jeffrey Dahmer. I'm thinking Jeffrey Dahmer is going to get high fives all around. For one thing, we freaking know his name.
Yeah.
Right? He made an impact. Huge impact, just like Hitler did. I mean, there's far more good has come from that experience in humanity than all the souls in my mind that volunteered to come here to help promote that experience. There were a lot of cast of characters in that play.
Sure.
And I don't see that was suffering. I see that was a B-roll that people played and volunteered for it, and now here we are still talking about it.
So what about the idea of control? That was something that came up as I was going to the bathroom. In relation to this conversation, that to the degree that anyone would want to have, how do I want to say this? I was thinking of it in terms of what you were saying in wondering if there wasn't the idea that there was something paying attention,
right,
you would be out of control. Your personality would not be able to exist out of that control box.
I felt similarly.
And so if you have that, it keeps you in check. But it's not being authentic because you're not giving yourself permission to explore, which I think is what we're all here to do, is explore. Whatever it is you want to explore, however you want to explore it. And it's interesting that we're using examples like Hitler and Jeffrey Dahmer, who, interestingly enough, were 100% congruent with who they were.
Right.
100% congruent. They didn't flinch. I slice people up and I eat them. And I'm good with that. That's freaking congruent. That's when you're saying up there getting high fives, they're getting high fives because they were so freaking congruent with who they believed they were. Now, there may be I'm not saying that that's a good thing overall, but still, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. They took a path, they walked that path to the very end of that path and did it 100%. And if we do that as individuals, that means that we have to relinquish control at some point, because in order to experience some things, we have to release constructs and beliefs about those things. To say, now I don't particularly personally have a desire to experience sticking a knife in someone, so I'm probably not going to go that direction. And I don't have to fear that I'm ever going to go that direction because it doesn't interest me. Right?
Yeah.
But there are other things that may not be socially acceptable, and I don't mean harmful. Sex. I like flavors. Nothing wrong with it. If I'm in a situation where flavors are acceptable, then I'm going to explore flavors. If I'm not, then I'm now limiting myself by conscious choice to not explore that part of myself. And if I choose to do that, that's okay, but I have to own it.
Right.
It's mine. It's not there. Not the universe didn't do it. My guides didn't tell me. It's my choice because this in front of me I've made more important than this to some degree or another. I think the fear is that the religious part of the fear is that if you allow that humanness to come forward, you'll lose complete control of who you are, and you'll go out and do all kinds of things that are horrible and mean, ugly, and nasty. And that's like, how would you know? You haven't given yourself permission. On one hand, and on the other hand, highly unlikely. But so.
Well, you were talking about control, and for me, it wouldn't necessarily be a loss of control. Control's a word for me that doesn't exist. I don't see that we have control over anything except the meaning that we assign to what happens. But for me, the point at which I don't want to harm somebody else at my expense, I don't want to take something from somebody else for my pleasure, for my benefit, consciously. I may be doing that unknowingly. Anything that I'm buying could have been made in a sweatshop somewhere that, but those are things that I'm not consciously aware of that are right in front of me. So those are the things for me. If this was a one and done, just even getting up tomorrow wouldn't even matter. It would just all for me be reduced down to.
So we'll
try that. Yeah. What is that?
Go for it.
What's going on with that? It wouldn't matter if it was one and done. So you're saying that if there wasn't an afterlife or some place for you to have you're putting credence on this idea that there's something else going on, and that's the only way this has any significance
how many
to
more
you?
chocolate cakes can I eat? How many more
do
beautiful
you want?
sunrises can I see that matter, that have any value? It's just
How many do you want?
just an experience. That's all it is. It's just an experience, and then it's gone. Like all the ones I can't even remember right now.
Yeah.
All those that I've had right now don't matter. They're just gone. And
But
it's
I don't
like-
know that they don't matter just
Well,
because
in
they're
that-
gone. Because if you had a chance to, put that little file back in.
Well, how would I do that
in the
if
mind?
it's one and done?
But
Huh?
I was just talking about a beautiful sunset that you saw when you were a kid with your grandpa, and the fact that you can't remember exactly what that sunset looked like doesn't mean that it's meaningless, because this is the only life that we have sufficient evidence for.
Well, and it had its impact in the moment, which was what it was for.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right.
And that's what it really gets down to, is that the only time that ever really exists is now. That's all that we ever have is now. And I think I'm still working my way into understanding the significance of that, because being brought up the way we were brought up, I was always thinking that the best is someday. The best is out here, like we're kind of paying our dues and this is what we're getting done, but eventually we're going to get to that someday. And I've watched so many beautiful people miss their life, really putting all their eggs in that basket, that it's off in the distance someplace. This utopia, this pleasure, this heaven, this nirvana, this Abraham's bosom, whatever you want to. That's all elsewhere and contingent on external things going on that may or may not happen. And so, with the evidence that we do have, how can we bring the idea of heaven into this moment? How can we be completely present? To me, when I'm completely fully present is when I'm just out of my mind, blissed out.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that let me just say this, the people that I love, some of the people that I love the most are least connected to this life because they are very much focused on what's going to happen eventually. We're just kind of just dredging through this because the streets of gold and the,
Pearly gates.
and that's off some other place. And so what I see happening is that a lot of people that are of that mindset end up having limited experience here because it is this idea that this is another place and another time, another experience is going to really give us what we're yearning for now. And I don't ascribe to that. I don't have any of my eggs in that basket of it being someplace else. I'm fascinated by the idea that I lose weight when I die. Not weight, but a few grams. I mean, that's really cool. And if it's beyond the idea that a gallon of milk and a gallon of water weigh the same, but a gallon of gasoline weighs more because it's got energy in it. It's got kinetic energy, and that's so. If I'm firing and ready, for what's happening with life, there may be more weight just based on the amount of subatomic particles in my system ready to charge. I don't know. I like the idea of like something going up, like what you saw on the side of the road. I'm open to that. But I choose to be as fully present in each moment that I can here, because this is the only existence that I have evidence for. Everything else is exciting to talk about, but I don't know that it exists. And so the quality of how I'm doing my daily has to do with how much I could be in the moment. And this idea of being elsewhere and like at the end of my days, having someone run through my life, it gives me like a critique of my life. I don't resonate with that. I really don't resonate with that because, as Michael Jackson said, like that's all about the man in the mirror. Like that's if I'm really being true to myself and I'm looking at myself in the mirror, I know how I'm showing up. I don't need somebody else to tell me what I did or didn't do. I know that I care deeply and I sacrificed what I could to help people out. So
you've added something to that.
Okay.
Because I didn't actually say that.
Didn't say
I
what?
didn't say that they're showing you how you did or didn't do. They're there with you, and the life review is your experiencing of the things that you got accomplished, but there's no judgment. And they're somehow able to bring the energy. They describe like a room that has all these iPads on it, and you look at that memory that's playing, and you look at that memory that's playing, and that one that's playing, and you have this experience of the totality of all of your life in one moment.
Okay.
That allows you to see
like DMT
how you showed up. And it's not, and nobody's really high-fiving or upset. It's just, and there's onlookers because they're curious. It's just like, you go to your kid's graduation and you're curious as to, did they get any awards? Did they barely make it through or whatever? It's not a really judgment thing. That's all.
Yeah.
When you talked about, you've used the word sufficient evidence several times, that I only have experience. There is no evidence. The experience that I'm bringing and sharing is what is showing up in my office each week in the work that I'm doing.
Right.
And both in past life reviews and afterlife connections with departed loved ones, as well as this newer, higher self connection therapy. And it's just showing up. And there's a video we could watch tonight where this woman is describing how it's truly changed her life. And whether it's because she wants it to or she imagined that it would, I don't know. It doesn't.
Sure.
That part doesn't matter to me so much. But I do know that if you're going to talk about evidence, there's only experience, really. And each person is going to have a little bit of a different experience. We've even talked about how the mere observation of something changes it. And if you can ever even really effectively do a repeated exercise or a repeated experiment because you've already changed it by observing it.
Yeah.
So it's like nothing is really provable. I don't know that there would ever be sufficient evidence for anything, and that's so far beyond our discussion. We're just kicking some ideas around.
Sure.
So who's there was a comment about I'm still hung up on your I'd wake up and nothing would matter.
Right. Yeah.
To who?
Yeah.
To me.
So if this moment is all you knew that you had, it wouldn't matter to you?
No, and it would just disappear into a vapor like it never even happened. And it just like
all the billions of people that
matter.
came before us?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to give me a few more words. I don't get that.
Okay.
But I think those billions of people that came before us do matter, and their experiences did matter.
Right.
And
To
that
what?
they build.
But did they matter because of the people that were congregated at the end of their life to look at their life? Is that what made it significant? Or was it just the fact that they had a moment where there was significance and they had meaning and they...
But what gives something meaning?
Yeah, exactly.
You do.
But
Yeah,
if I'm
I
one
do.
and done, and I never even came here. I never existed. There's no record of it.
The
There's no
smile of
experience.
you firing up your boat.
How did we get there? How did we go from what?
Yeah.
You're making like these
Well,
quantum
right.
leaps
So this
from waking up and nothing matters to annihilation. I'm like, wait, what? Help me here. Can I have a few steps in between?
Because I've seen you like giddy happy, firing up your boat and going out and watching fireworks and being next to the lady you love, and like smart, savvy, badass people coming in and talking, guests coming into the think tank and chatting with us, and you're so into it, man. It's because you are present in that moment. I don't quite understand the leap from that's really cool because you think that this is going to mean something eventually.
No, it means something now, but it will also continue to have meaning. And what gives it meaning is because it was planned, and that there's value to these experiences.
Planned
By us before we came here.
Okay.
The whole thing is an intelligent design. It's all divinely organized and orchestrated, and it all works for a reason, for a purpose, for a growth.
So if that's the case, how would you wake up and none of it matters?
Well, I was going back to you don't go on, and that there was no planning involved with any of this. It was just all random. It was just an ooze we climbed out. However you get to no intelligent design and no divine intervention, however that would be, there's no Akashic records.
You went to extreme then, if I'm understanding, because we didn't have any of that conversation at this table today. None of those words came out on this table today that you just used. So I'm curious. I'm like, wait again. We're going from 0 to 100.
So atheism or agnostic means there's no God, there's nobody writing any of this down, there's no plan for any of it. It's just random and it's just happening, and when it's done,
Agnostic
it's done.
and atheism aren't interchangeable.
Right, I hit both of them.
But you said that the definition of both of them means that there's no God, and that's not what agnostics are. Just saying that there's not. They're open, but there's just not enough. Back to my word, there's just not enough evidence. If there was something that came along that could blow my mind and open me up to that, I would be open to that. I'm not. That's like the last little bit of the scientific endeavor is always being open to new information, and so yeah, I'm wide open. I'm wide open to that. It'd be kind of cool, but I think the way that that can significantly squelch the overall integrity of a critical thinking mind when people are just kind of thinking that there's other people going to be taking care of this eventually at some other juncture that I don't. I'm okay with right now, and I'm okay with this meaning something in a parallel universe, or something that I get to join forces with on the other side of the sun, and with I'm cool with all that, but I for whatever reason I have a lot of peace about this being my time, and trying to make the most of it, and being happy and fulfilled. And my nephew was just in town, my sister's boy, and my first time. I've been waiting 20 years to spend time with him. We spent 4 days together and had a really wonderful time. And I know that time with him is going to serve him for the rest of his life. What things that we talked about, this philosopher's stone that we like to polish here, was quite evident in my time with Julian. But it's just difficult for me to get to a place where I think that any of this only matters if it's about something else, somewhere else, another time, another place, another energy. This is enough for me. I feel really happy to be here, and I see you really happy in a moment on many occasions, and I don't know if you were being dramatic when you said that you would have nothing to, like, you would just be done, because like if you didn't know that, if you didn't have it in your heart that something was next, that you wouldn't contribute. I don't believe that. I don't believe that about you.
What would you be contributing toward?
Whatever the hell you want.
Whatever you want. This moment.
Which is what you're doing now.
But why would I want?
But that's what you're doing already.
I know, because of my model. I don't know. I wouldn't know how to do that without the model. I wouldn't know how to want anything, desire anything, and nothing would have meaning for me without this model that I'm talking about. For me.
Can you explain that, how that model supports... Just pretend like I just landed here, and maybe I did.
Well,
it's been argued.
If I can interject just for a second, because I'm having this really amazing experience of this agnostic who has God experiences but doesn't necessarily have scientific evidence of God, and I have a guy over here who creates but thinks he has no purpose if he doesn't have somebody telling him he's got a purpose.
But that somebody's also me,
right? And I'm just marveling at, isn't it amazing that we create exactly what we need? The whole caterpillar butterfly thing, it's all over the place. It's like your caterpillar to a butterfly is its own beautifully unique process, mm-hmm. and you've created a structure to support it, as have you, that this magnificent structure that gives your experience meaning so that you can propel yourself forward, because you truly believe that without that meaning there would be nothing. And that's pretty remarkable. And it's cool to me. It's just kind of like, wow, it changes the whole idea of needing to fix people, because there's nothing to fix.
Right.
They built their construct
Yep.
because that's what they need. Now, if there's something I can do to help fine-tune it, cool. If there's some word choices, or some concept choices that are a little out of kilter, they're telling me that. I'm not telling them that. Right? So I can go, oh yeah, cool. We can, frame it, and they're still going to take it, and they're going to pull it into their little box, and they're going to run it around in their little box, and they're going to go, I can put that over here. That works. And now I have a window where I didn't have a window before. That's awesome. In my little box. Now I have a window in my little box. And then that keeps growing until finally they don't need the box anymore. But
I like it.
We may or may not be a part of that part of the process. Somebody said that to me at one point about when you do, especially when you're dealing with change, growth and evolution and nothing, in process, that you have to be willing to see the people that you work with excel beyond you.
Absolutely.
Right.
And how important it is to be in a space of allowing that and be excited for that. which is I found over the years has become so true. Because you can't, if you're not willing to let them blow past you, you're creating limitation.
Yes, absolutely.
So when do you think that I've had experiences with? I'm not saying I
We
haven't.
talk about them all the time.
How so?
Every time you're in bliss.
Yeah.
What do you?
But how is it in him?
that?
I guess I'm not quite.
Well, personal pronouns, whatever.
Well,
It's a habit.
okay. Right. Exactly.
But that's,
But can't that just
to
be
me is
my
the
bewilderment
experience.
with nature and with natural law, and just like just being in the mystery of that, and maybe that's God to some people, but
that's from the outside looking in,
yeah,
going, really? You're questioning whether there's God. You have these experiences that blow your mind, and you don't really know that you have evidence that there's a
but
mind.
the same experiences may not be blowing someone else's mind.
Doesn't matter.
Exactly, and so I'm in a position to get
At what-
bliss. I'm in a position to get bliss from experiences because I feel like I've removed a lot of the debris that has kept me from finding that bliss. But we're talking about God, and
In the end, I don't think it matters whether you call it God. That may
Yeah.
be what I need to call it because that makes sense to me. Just like we were just talking the three boxes. From my perspective, it doesn't matter what you call it.
That's conscious languaging.
The observer in me looks at that and goes,
oh, he experienced God.
"Yeah, good for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, baby, go
Yeah.
for it.
Yeah.
Do more of that."
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's awesome. But that's I'm giving it. That's an attribution. It's my viewpoint projected onto your
Sure.
experience.
Gotcha.
Don't know.
I follow.
I don't know that it's a judgmental one. That's another place we could go, but I don't know that if that's a judgment. That's just an assessment of my filter looking at your experience
Yeah. Yeah.
and saying, "Wow, that's awesome."
Yeah. But what's so cool for me is that I don't feel like I'm missing out on just thinking of it as my orienting myself around natural law. And if I get bliss from getting into flow with whatever the cosmos is bringing, and I get to be part of that, that is enough for me. I don't, but I don't necessarily, when I think of God, and I think of God.
Yeah, I was gonna say. See, we put that Texas on
That's
there.
right. We had a
fantastic.
9-hour discussion about what is God, and during one of our think tanks, I think you guys left, and then we continued on, Henry and some other people. But what is God? Like that was just such a fascinating topic for me. But I'm okay being an observer and aligning myself with the flow of what I understand to be natural law, and that's the bliss that you see. And so, if that's God, then that's cool. I think if we questioned 1,000 people, what is God, what they would say would have something to do with something else, something hierarchical. That it was a pecking order, and it's something outside and it's above, rather than well, no, God's in the flower, it's in your blood, it's in all of us. Like that to me doesn't feel like a God. That feels like a form of consciousness, a form of elemental nature of the cosmos. Those are, and again we're back to verbiage and what feels good. So. Semantics, indeed.
About just God as love,
Yeah,
and however that shows up, and all the different ways that it shows up.
indeed. And what are we afraid of to call God love instead of God? You think of wars being fought over people's ideas of what God is, right? But
Yeah,
you don't think about wars being
That's
fought
not
over
love, is it?
what love is.
that's not love, right?
Right.
Which band sang the song "Love Is All There Is"? Is that the Beatles? Is that John
Love is
Lennon?
all
Or
there is, yeah.
Love is all you need.
Love is all there is.
Yeah.
Love is all you need. Love is all there is. Whatever. One of those songs.
One of them songs. Yeah.
So let's back up for a moment.
Let's do it.
You've talked about natural laws. You've talked about sufficient evidence.
Yeah.
What if, big what if here, there are no natural laws and there will never be sufficient evidence? Just what if with me for a moment.
Okay.
Warner Earhart, who is the founder of EST and the founder of
I tried.
Landmark?
By the way, I tried.
I can't imagine
couldn't.
you in that format.
I couldn't. Oh no, I'd kill people. No. I tried to watch that video,
Yeah?
and I could take about 10 minutes of him, and I was like, no, dude, please.
He's a little old school. So
So I'm
he
working
gets
with
into
you.
this. We don't even know what I is in this concept of I think, therefore I am. The fundamental flaw in that statement is that we know what I is. That was just an assumption. We don't. These two older gents were kicking around this idea that most of us have an inner critic, and we think it's our inner critic. What if it's a universal inner critic that's able to observe, and somehow because it observes and it seems so frickin' personal that we think that's I, but it isn't. And most everyone experiences it. What they didn't talk about in that little vignette was something I tripped on a while back, was that Buddhist monks are able to suspend the inner critic. But you have to be a freaking Buddhist monk.
Right.
And it takes a long time and a lot of... You see the world like through that as a Buddhist
right.
monk. And I'm not saying that's the way. It's not good or bad. It's just a way. Buddhist monks are also able to only be in the moment. That they've done repetition studies with Buddhist monks where they show patterns and most people can recognize a pattern. And certain Buddhist monks with a certain amount of training can re-experience these things like they're happening to them for the first time over and over and over again. But again, that's a discipline that apparently takes a really long time. And like once you're in it, you're like, well, okay, well, yeah, all right, now what? Okay, I can be truly in the moment, and I don't have an inner critic. Am I helping my community? That might sound like a judgment, but I wouldn't know what to do with that at that point. And obviously, most of us don't choose that path, so we wrestle with the inner critic, and we do have this pattern recognition, pattern response that we're seeing things in patterns all the time. That is a little bit off the beaten path to this notion of we don't know what I is. And there may not even be one. That's the even more trippy thing. That we really don't know anything.
Yeah.
We don't know how to describe a caterpillar becoming a butterfly. So if we can allegedly send a man to the moon...
Magic goo?
Ooze.
Ooze.
Yeah.
Okay.
We think we can send a man to the moon and we can do all these amazing things, print human organs in 3D printers now, and that's pretty freaking amazing.
Yeah.
And at some point I'm sure we'll have AI that is indistinguishable between a regular human. That's probably not that far away. But we don't have the answers to any of this stuff. None. Do you guys remember us trying to kick around the idea of flat Earth versus round Earth, and just how that you just want to go, no, it's a round Earth. We absolutely know it. Come on, we've been around long enough to know that that's just a freaking fact. Well, what if it isn't?
No, I actually love watching some of that because they actually have some pretty compelling.
It is.
I want to know more about that because right now it just seems absurd.
Let's talk about that.
It's
I know it
fascinating.
is. So this conversation that we could have right now that we probably won't, but just let's talk about the topic of the topic. The topic. We're not going to talk about flat Earth versus round Earth. What I'd like to talk about right now is I took the time to actually take a look at it, which makes me a little bit more I drank a little bit more Kool-Aid, so I'm a little bit more under the influence of it,
I see.
I'm a little bit more educated. I'm a little bit more of something, and I don't even know what to call it. Exposed, thank you. To be able to have a conversation about it than someone else who hasn't drank the Kool-Aid
Right.
or been exposed. So we can't even really have a conversation about it until we've been equally exposed.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with most of our communication on the planet is we're not
But this is
freaking equally
but
exposed.
this is an opportunity for you to help me. You're a smart guy. You've got a great sense of memory. You could probably share with me some of the compelling arguments of the flat Earth.
I don't remember them.
No,
Oh, okay.
and it's funny because I was sitting
It's
here trying
too
to remember them
freaking
too.
deep.
Wow.
It's
Oh, wow.
way
You gotta
too
watch the
freaking
videos.
deep, man.
You gotta watch the videos. 'cause
Yeah, it
it's
like I said, it's like somebody stuck a pick in my head and went like that. Literally.
Yeah.
because you
Yeah.
literally sit back and go, "Wow, I hadn't thought about it that way before." Doesn't mean I think that it's flat. It's just really compelling, and you go, "That's not illogical."
So here's the point though. So I literally had a freaking knockdown, beat up, drug out fight over this exact issue where somebody told me that I'm way too opinionated and I state things as facts that aren't, and I come across as a know-it-all, and I'm like, wow, really? Because I constantly say, I can't prove this, we can't prove this, I'm not attached to this, I'm not taking a position on this, but I have exposed myself to
Right.
this concept.
And I wondered if you did that because it's something as a doctor. I think about it because you do it every time we have a session. You say those words. And I kept thinking, is that because does he have to say that because he's a doctor? So he
No.
doesn't want to make people think that he's
No.
making claims or something? Like,
No.
why do you have to?
It's a point that I'm trying to make, that nothing is knowable because it has to be built on an assumption that we know freaking something. And we don't know anything.
But we can't say that we don't know anything.
Most people would say this table is solid. It ain't, man.
Sure.
There's more space.
But how do we
between it.
know that? We know that because of science.
But we don't even know the elements of what's in it. We think we do. We think they're electrons and protons and neutrons, but
There's
if
a
you
lot of
really
missing
get into
space.
it,
There's a lot of space.
we don't know.
We don't know
that.
what's filling that space. Yes.
We don't know how
Yeah.
that works.
Right.
And if you really get into it, most.
But the fact that we could
physicists will
have
say
this
it's atomic
conversation at
glue.
all
So here we go back to
goes
atomic
to
glue
science.
and magic ooze. So that's what we could agree on: atomic glue and magic ooze.
And what's so cool
That's science
is that
right there.
Einstein was perplexed and threatened by the quantum realm. He didn't like it. He called it the spooky,
Yes.
science from afar or something like that. He just didn't. He didn't want to even look at it because it just fucked up his whole notion of Newtonian
he
science.
needed to know that there's something knowable, and I've passed that. I don't need to know that something's knowable. What I'm trying to share is I've had these experiences.
So let's talk about those.
I am. We have been for the last 8 times we've gotten together.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm sharing.
And I feel like I'm present for those conversations, and I'm down.
We have been.
Yeah, I
You've
want
been
to hear.
awesome.
I want to hear more about what you got in your wheelhouse of experience, because I have respect for you and how your mind works and your heart works, and so I want to know a little bit more about what you're doing with people and this this new line that you're talking about. Your
the higher self. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Awesome idea. Really awesome idea. I haven't heard much about it, so
I haven't either. It's just like I'm saying. It's just showing up.
evolving as you.
I've never read a book about it.
Okay.
Well, that's not necessarily true. The concept has been presented. So I'm like, hey, I want some exposure to this. I want to try it. And just like the healers group that I did that you presented at, we tried the psychic reading, and gee, guess what? We freaking did it. We did the past life review. We did the controlled remote viewing. I mean, all the things that we took 3 deep breaths and we clicked our heels together 3 times and we said hokey pokey and we turned ourselves about, and guess what? Boom, we had a freaking experience.
Yeah.
And most of the people that were present were like really amazed by it. Especially when dead people started showing up and revealing shit that only they could know about this person's life, and that like really blew a lot of people away. And I'm just laughing my ass off, going, "Wow! If you are open, stuff will show up. It may all be a ruse. It may all be a big hoax and a big joke. I don't know."
When you think about what your end game is with asking these questions 3, what comes to mind? What do you?
That we're all one. We all come from a common source, and let's stop seeing each other as separate. I'm you, you're me. I love you. I'm asking you to love me.
Yeah.
My warts and freckles and all.
Yeah.
And there just isn't really anything to know. If we could just get past this, I've really tried to know a lot of shit. I have.
Yeah. Right.
And every time I really think I become an expert at something, there's something that comes along and just totally turns it sideways. And I love
See,
that.
I think that is the quintessential definition of the evolution of consciousness. Absolutely 100%. Because at every threshold that you encounter in the evolution of consciousness is a paradox. And it takes what was before and flips it on its head.
I love it.
Yeah.
And you have to then spend a quantity of time now reintegrating what you spent a quantity of time trying to unlearn.
Yes, sure.
Yeah.
And then you go, I can't believe I worked all that, and I get to here, and it does a flip. You go, holy crap, that's amazing. But again, going through the when you cross that threshold, there's a whole different perception of it there. So it's like it's a laughable oh shit moment in that you go, wow, that's just freaking amazing, and oh my god. And I just spent 3 years of my life rooting around in my crap.
Rooting, well said, sir.
Trying to get my this and my that, and I get it all worked out, and I'm feeling good, and phew!
That's what pigs do, right? They root around.
Exactly.
And then
Timothy, you mentioned hanging out with a lizard for 20 minutes once upon a time.
Hey,
was the
that's
lizard
hearsay.
staring
That's
at
hearsay. Yes, I do.
Staring at him.
I might have been underestimating the amount of time that I spent with.
It could have been longer.
It could have been longer.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So where I'm going with this is, in order for me to have a discussion with you about joining with a lizard, bonding with a lizard, observing a lizard, it observing you, if I told you that I could imagine you doing that, or if I told you I've seen a lizard once, would we be able to have an equal conversation about that?
Right.
The answer is no, right? There's no way that I could have a conversation with you about that at an equal level, right? Even though I know what a lizard is, I've held a lizard, I've touched them, I've eaten them, I've skinned them, I've looked at them, I've raised them, I've seen them lay eggs, but I haven't done what you've done. And that moved you in some way that I could never know unless I went and did that with you, right?
Right.
So do you find it, I find it interesting that people will try to imagine, or they'll try to enter a conversation without the exposure.
Limited. Exactly.
And try to, have it right here.
Yeah.
And we just can't.
Yeah.
So if people will join us in reading these books and having these discussions and being willing to be open and being right and being wrong or being judged or being accepted or being laughed at or whatever, I mean, that's how we're sharing. All we're doing is sharing. We're just sharing.
Indeed. And I love it. It's a fun crew meeting with you guys every week. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a nice cross section of experience that's all converging, and I like how we self-regulate and kind of call each other out and when there's stuff going on, and I dig it. And you're absolutely right. I want you to know that as far as anything that you feel me kind of going, well, wait a minute now. If you can give me a story, if you can share some of what's going on in your world, show me your videos, and I'll be open to that. I'll be
I
open
got
to that.
something to show you.
Hey, now.
Right here, right now?
Me too.
I don't know that story. I have to go get some experience.
You know what I love about how this unfolds is, as Jim pointed out a couple of times, wow, you just took like a giant leap and threw this out here. Well, yeah, these discussions create an opportunity to kind of lay it out more succinctly, or it brings out stuff I haven't even put words to before.
And I think that's the key in there, is that those, when you do that, we then, as a group, we then go back and have to bridge that, which I think is what's the value, part of the value to the podcast, is that we can connect through the conversation, begin to connect the dots to how did you get from
Right. How did you get so crazy?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I think is really cool.
So let's begin to wrap this one up for tonight. But before we say goodnight, let's tickle the appetites of what we think we might talk about in future podcasts. Because as far as I'm concerned, unless you want to talk about it some more, we're done. We're wrapping it up, calling it a cut on the where did we come from, why are we here,
Hell
where are we
no.
going. You want to do that some more?
You know what? I'm just saying it's not a done deal. We may be wise to draw a little line in the sand and venture forward in some other areas, but I think there's always more to unveil. You know, this is an archaeological dig, and we got a few layers in, and I think that when the time's right, we'll let it unfurl.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
So what's been happening? I mean, we're able to reference our previous times together and pull some of those things that we talked about, 5 times ago into the current conversation, and give them more depth and more clarity and more conversation.
And we have the illusion that there's someone else out there that would actually be listening to all 5 of these things, or 10, or however many are, and keeping track of it, and like they're really interested, right? That's kind of interesting too.
Because we are. That's half.
So what else do you think we would want to talk about, kick around, discover, explore?
I think there's a lot of our interconnectivity that's important to each of us, and off of Mike, we've had some good conversations about relationship and how that can go and what's expected, and I think we could devote some time to what it's like to explore intimacy. Just what is intimacy? I think that would be an interesting topic. Maybe what is service? Mm-hmm. We talk about, like, if you feel like you're in service, you feel like you're on track. Me too. What does that look like for each of us? I think that's a good way to go. What about you, Jimbo?
You just got a new nickname, by the way. Did you hear that, Jimbo?
Oh, that's not new. But thanks.
Are you okay with that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
For me, some of the things you were talking about, Timothy, I think would be fun. I like to dive into some things that look at the nature of our individual realities. And what I mean by that is I'm continually amazed at looking at the world at large and some of the things that people get really twisted and upset about that have nothing to do with their reality.
I know.
And
it's fascinating. It's really so much time in that narrative.
We can go there. But that's one for me. But
what would we call that topic? That's like
mind your own damn business.
It's not relevant.
Sweep the sidewalk.
Right, yeah.
A pivot, the big pivot.
Alanis Morissette, under rug swept. No.
But yeah, that kind of conversation. I love the idea of because I know the one week that you weren't available, we had a really deep dive in the relationship piece. I think that would be fun to explore some more.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I would like us to be able to connect relevant current stuff to what we're talking about, meaning things that people are struggling or people are wanting to understand more deeply, similar to the idea of, how do you deal with the Donald Trump in the world
getting into,
type of thing.
Yes, and getting into our expertise, because we all have expertise, and I think that this audience would really appreciate us all tackling similar issues and seeing how we each go about trying to get the nectar out of that, get the lesson, get the wisdom out of it.
Yeah.
I think that's
And
where
helping
this.
people-
I think that's where this is going to really begin to get momentum, because I think that's where we're all most versed. We've had our
Well,
Yeah.
redefining, helping to redefine what has been terms, the way people use language, how it's been, and I don't mean specifically focusing in language. I'm thinking more in terms of concept and thinking more in terms of what I see, which is the need, helping to reframe how things are looked at or how things are defined. Things like anxiety, things like depression, things like addiction, all of those topics
fascinating.
have
Let's go.
so much underpinning.
Let's
and
do
so
it.
much
Relevance
substance
in our
and
society,
relevance.
absolutely, 100%.
So anyway, a couple ideas.
I want to talk more about the I and meaning. Those are two things that jumped out at me tonight. There was a exercise I remember doing in the healers group called try to not use the word I.
I remember.
Hard to do. And you
I still use that.
yeah?
Yeah. When I'm texting and when I'm just having conversation, I yeah. Obviously, not when I'm speaking as much. But when I'm writing, I'm very cognizant of where my eyes are.
Yeah.
And there's ways to say things without it. It just takes up space. It's a bandwidth, and it doesn't necessarily need to always be about that. And I think it frees up the reader when there's less of it. So please.
Yeah. So those are two topics I'd love to explore.
Okay. Right on.
Well, you guys ready to wrap it for tonight? Any final thoughts?
Yeah. Whatever brings bliss and peace into our existence, I think would be interesting to talk about, and maybe we can all chime in on what that has looked like in our lifetime. The way our parents did it. How did our parents dial in bliss? Did they even understand that that was even a possibility? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Maybe not. And then ways that we have asked certain questions that have led us into the well, I like figuring stuff out that I don't have to figure out again. And I think that there's a lot of people in this world that are just my experience with clients, people that are running tape, running story, narrative of I would love to dedicate an entire podcast to narrative and what people are tuning into unconsciously.
Yeah.
I think there's so much going on. People don't realize that they can just tune back into what is bringing them bliss and continuity in their interpersonal world. We're taught to be addicted to the things that bring drama and chemical release, and like just like we're constantly looking for the next and the next and the next. But what is it that brings us peace? What are our practices to get there? And I think that's an important caveat to our audience. So,
Right on. Story. Jim's talked about it.
yeah,
I know it shows up in my practice 10 times a day.
damn straight.
Easily.
We will talk about story.
Thanks for your loyalty there, patrons, and thanks for hanging in there with us. We're enjoying this, and we're just free flowing, riffing, seeing where we land. And thanks for taking part.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Toodaloo.